few stories about how that worked in my life. Starting with around like junior year of high school. So for me, a lot of these hard times came after like a really big loss. And typically for me, death and loss, like periods of depression have followed that. And so that's been a really big theme. So the first time this happened was junior year of high school. I lost my grandmother, my grandfather, my dog, all kind of in the same few months. And I remember visiting my aunt. We were like saying goodbye to my grandma. And I was like, oh, I'm crying all the time, what's going on? Like, I have no reason to be sad. Just completely oblivious to like what was actually going on. And that ended up lasting for quite a few months, maybe even through the end of high school. And looking back, it's pretty obvious what was going on. And at that time, I'd also kind of strayed from church a little bit. Just didn't go to youth group as much, wasn't really connected. But junior year, we got a new minister, and they had a daughter my age, and our moms kind of like set us up to be friends, and we kind of instantly clicked. And so she was the reason I went back to school, started going on the trips in the summer, and she's still my best friend to this day. Definitely the most important person in my life. And I don't know if I would have got through that time without her. And at this point in time, the first trip we went on was to Alaska that summer. And it was kind of the first time I went on one of the trips with the youth group. And from then on, I realized those trips, I always kind of encountered God in a really special way. Nothing like big and magical that stands out, but it's just always when I felt Him present. And then I think it's really cool to like watch other people go through that too. And I just kind of can't stress enough like how awesome that feels to go through with your friends and to feel that comfort. So consider it for Puerto Rico Club. The next time I was in a similar place, college for me was not a very fun time. Freshman year was fun. I went to Florida State, it was a lot of fun. But my priorities were not in order. So, not only that, but there was a lot going on in my personal life. Ultimately, I think even still, probably my biggest loss, just because it was such a surprise and such a difficult time. But it was when my parents got divorced. So I ended up moving home after sophomore year for a lot of reasons. But partially it was because my mom was really struggling. So her mom had just passed away. She was kind of just falling apart. She was drinking a lot. And my mom had always been kind of my rock, faith-wise. And otherwise, like we were always very close. And so I was noticing a lot of behavior that was not her, and that was kind of hurting everyone around her. So, long story short, I kind of got caught in the middle of things going on between her and my dad. I noticed some behavior that wasn't good. And ultimately I needed to tell that to my dad, and that kind of resulted in them splitting up. This was definitely the most painful time of my life. Not even so much because they separated, but just what was going on at the time and having to kind of betray each of them in a way, and it just felt really, really lonely. So I kind of had to move out suddenly. I think it was the first time that I just kind of turned to my Bible and just started reading it. And I think I was just kind of desperate for answers, just trying to find some kind of direction. I was trying to find meaning in the situation. And it took a while, It was definitely a rough few years, but it did kind of feel like the minute I started turning to God, things started falling into place. I went back to the youth group I grew up in and started being an advisor, started going on trips and watching how they impacted people younger than me, and it was just a really special time that kind of helped bring me through what was the hardest time. A lot of blessings just started coming into place. One of those was that I got into grad school in Boston, so I moved there after college. I started dating someone new about a year after moving there. And I think this was the first time in my life where I figured out that God could help me through tough times. This was the first time I kind of purposely sort of shut him out. Maybe it wasn't purposely, but I knowingly was doing that. Boston's an amazing place to live, but the Northeast is not very spiritual, or a lot of people aren't very religious up there, and specifically a lot of people I surrounded myself with weren't Christians, and it didn't feel like something I could talk about, and that's kind of on me too. But it felt like it just wasn't a part of anyone else's life, so it shouldn't be a part of mine. Or at least it shouldn't be something I talked about. And that went for the person I was dating too, which was kind of maybe even more convincing to give it up, because I wanted that so bad. So back to my best friend from high school. She came to town and she was like, "Kelly, this is nice." She actually probably hated him because he didn't make a very good first impression, but she was like, "This is nice, but he doesn't believe in God, he doesn't have faith, how's that going to work? That's always been so important to you." And I was like, it would be so wrong for me to judge someone who has different beliefs than me. I'm not going to do that. I don't need him to have faith for me to have faith. That's separate. I was wrong, but it took a few years to realize that. Another loss happened, maybe mid-20s. I'd had a horse since I was 11. I'm an only child, so he was my best friend. And got me through a lot of hard times. So suddenly found out he had to be put down, which is kind of a production with a 1,000-pound animal. I called my boyfriend to come out. He basically said no. And I think this was my final wake-up call from God. And after this loss was definitely a period of the deepest depression I've ever been in. I think I felt lost in a lot of ways. But this time I didn't have God nearby, it felt like. But I went back to my Bible, started reading it. Didn't always necessarily help immediately, but felt like I was doing something, felt like I was trying. I went to one of the trips with my home church that year, and I just remember looking around thinking, look at all these other advisors who I've known forever. There's 6 guys here who love Jesus and want to talk about him to other people and want to serve and help people. Why am I choosing to be with somebody who can't do that, or who doesn't want to, and who criticizes it even? It was very much an aha moment. So the day after I got back, ended that relationship, and a lot of changes took place that year, but again, it felt like the blessings just started flowing. It was a hard year, but a lot of good things started happening. A lot of things. I've been denied for a grant for my dissertation 4 times, and they came back to me and said, "Actually, we have extra funds this year. Here you go." And that changed the whole trajectory of my grad school. So stuff like that. And finally, once again, 3rd time's the charm, I realized every time I meet him, he's still there. Doesn't matter how long I've been gone, it's still something that's so accessible, it's right there. So, present day, last story, I promise. I've been a lot more consistent with my faith for the past 8 or so years. exactly where I'm supposed to be in my life right now. And that is one of the best feelings I think you can have, just knowing that you're on the right path, knowing God has a plan for you and you're like in it. But something was missing. I was like 32, I was worried I might have to start a family by myself, kind of time felt like it was running out, felt like I wasn't going to find a person that God had planned for me. After some failed dating attempts, really didn't want to meet strangers off an app. Felt really unnatural, but for some reason, this one I went. The day before, I had a therapy session, and my therapist, also a therapist, but my therapist, I was like, I'm just going to focus on me and my dog. Like, I'm just going to be happy by myself. That seems to work. And she was like, no, we're not doing that. We're not going down that path. Tell me what you're looking for. So I mentioned a few things, but that included someone who has faith, someone who has been through things and learned from it, somebody who is compassionate and cares about other people. Those don't sound like big deal things, but I hadn't prioritized them in the past. And they are big deal things. So, went on this date the next day, and it was like he had heard the whole session. I was like, he's telling me all the things I told her. How is that possible? And I left that date just kind of with the similar feeling that I had at work. Like, not I knew this person was the person, but just like, thank you God for showing me that what's meant for me exists. That it's there, that I'll find it eventually if it's not this. But fortunately it was that. I wish you could hear his testimony too, because it is so powerful. It's similar in the sense of like a lot of hard times, but, and I know you can't compare, but like really hard times. Like a lot of loss. And I think that's one of the things I love about him most, just that he still has faith despite all of that, and it's something we can talk about together. And he would say the same thing, loss and dark times are what has made his faith stronger. So, I guess to kind of wrap it up, it's taken time and time again for me to remember that God is always there, especially in the hard times. This past year was a rough one with like family news and health stuff, and ultimately I just wanted to be so angry at God. And I think that's okay sometimes to actually be angry. I think it's how you find meaning and get answers, but I couldn't be angry because I think after all this time I just know that the plan on the other side is there and the timing is going to be perfect, and that's really frustrating because my timing feels a lot more appropriate and I would like to be in control, but ultimately God's got the plan. So one other thing I want you to hear in all of this is that no matter how far you stray from God, or how long you live your life without Him, or how deeply in the other direction you go from Him, He's never gone. He's always there. You can always come back, and if you listen closely enough, He's probably been calling you back for a while.